Hello and welcome to a quick watercolor practice where we'll paint some pretty pink flowers. These will be really easy and anyone can follow along. So what I've done is I've got two different colors. I mixed two different colors. The light pink is alizarin crimson. These are all from Winsor & Newton. This is alizarin crimson. I used a bit of Chinese white and then a bit of burnt umber, which is this brown color over here, just to mute it a little bit. And for the dark color, I used my Perylene Violet and I also added some brown burnt umber. Now, if you don't have these colors, that's okay. You can just use whatever you have in your palette. I've also got some paper from Fabriano. It's 300 grams, which is the same as 140 pounds. I've got a paper towel for blotting and then also a glass of water. Now, let's first start with our light pink. So with watercolor, you'll want to work your way up. You start with the light color and then move on to the darker areas if you want to add shading or any details. And I forgot to mention, I'm using my number 4 brush. It's a round brush with natural hairs, and it's perfect for holding lots of pigment and lots of water. And what I'm going to do is, if I want to create a pointy end, I'm going to twirl it on my pan. See how I'm twirling it here on my plate? And that just creates a tip at the end of your brush. Okay, so I'm creating a light wash for the first layer. And let me just add some water to make it lighter. You don't want to add too much water to your paper, otherwise it will warp. So I'm just gonna soak some of it up with my brush, and I'll add some over here as well to make this one just a bit lighter. Now get some more of that light pink onto your brush, and then we'll paint another petal. This will be a flower with 5 petals, and this could be cherry blossom or some spring blossom. And let's maybe make one that's a little bit closer to the other one, just to add some variation. And one last petal over here. And while our petal is still wet, or our flower is still wet, we can add more water where we want our petal to be lighter. And if we want areas to be darker, like say for the center here, let's add some more pigment. And the drier your paper is, the less it will spread. So watercolor, it's all about timing. You don't want it to be too wet, but you don't want it to be too dry either. And let's just get some more of that color onto our brush. And while the petals are still wet, I'm gonna just randomly add some darker areas so we can create some depth and contrast and give it some life. I also added a stroke here in the middle. This could be like the center of our petal. And it's going to still spread out while it's drying up, so you won't make any harsh lines now that our petals are still wet. And it's spreading out a little bit too much here in the center. Let's just wait for that to dry. And maybe we can make one that's facing to the side over here. Add some water so it can get a bit lighter. That's a bit too much. Let me just dab it on my tissue paper. I've got a hair. I've got a hair here. Let me just remove that. Okay. For our next petal, we can paint it like this. And maybe one over here. And this one can be folding over a little bit. Yeah, I like that. And while it's still wet, I'm going to add some more of the pink in the middle here, just at the base of our flower. And let's see if this is still wet. Yeah, I'm going to add some more over here. And I'm also going to add some of the dark, this is like a purpley, dark brownish color. I'm just going to call it purple. I'm going to also add that in the middle while it's still wet. Let's draw or paint two more leaves here in the back, or petals. And I want to create some more highlights here in this flower because it's looking very flat to me. So I'm going to add some water like I just did, and then I'm going to soak up some of it with my brush in the middle. So on the outer areas, I'm still leaving most of the pigment, but then in the middle, I'm adding water and then soaking some of it up. All right, let's paint one more flower down here, just a cute one. And also painting 5 petals. Let's add some more water, it's a bit too dry. And then with our pink, I'm just going to dab it a bit in the middle. And then we can wait for that to dry so we can move on to our leaves. All right, it's dried up a little bit. So I created this greenish color. I used praline green and then some yellow ochre. So that creates like a dark olive color. Let me just add a bit more of my dark green to make it darker. And you can use whatever green you like or whichever one is your favorite. And again, I'm twirling my brush onto my plate or my pen so that it creates a nice tip. And we can just randomly add some leaves. And it's okay if it's spreading into it a little bit. I've waited it for it to dry so it doesn't completely spread, but if it overlaps a little bit, it kind of gives a nice effect. So let's make a darker one over here. See how this is spreading into the flower a little bit. I love how it does that. That's the beauty of watercolor. It always spreads and bleeds into each other, the parts that are wet. If you don't want that, then you just have to wait for it to dry completely before adding the leaves. And you don't have to completely copy my composition. You can do whatever feels right for you. Just use your own artistic eye. And like before, while your paint is still wet, you can still work on it and manipulate it. So if you want to make it lighter, add some water or dry it off with your brush. And if you want to make it darker, just add more pigment. This is spreading out a bit too much. It's too much green in my pink. So I will remove a bit with water. It's still damp, so we can still work with it. And here as well, let me just remove that a bit. And since it's still wet, we can add even more of our dark purple color. I think this one is, oh, I think this one is dry, but look, it's still spreading out a bit, which is perfect. So we can add more of that color. This one is still very wet. I'm just gonna blend that with a damp brush because I don't want any harsh lines. And this part of the flower, it's dried up already. So I'm just gonna blend it in with water. And I do like how this one is not spreading as much. So let's wait for these to dry a bit more so we can add the center. All right, I've waited for it to dry, so I think it's almost dry. Let's just get some of our purple. No, it's still pretty wet, but not as wet as before, which is good. add a tiny bit over here as well. That looks really nice. And now what I'm going to do is I want to add even more details, but I'm going to use my number 1 brush for this. So I'm doing the same as well. I'm twirling my brush onto my pan. And actually, I got the wrong color onto it. I'm going to get the light pink because I want to add some details in the petals. And for that, we need a really light pink color. So I'm going to add some smaller strokes and also some thicker strokes for the petals. Let me just turn my paper, making really thin strokes, and then also some thicker ones. And they're a bit dark, but you can add water to it. And they'll also dry up lighter. So here as well, just some details, some strokes. You don't need to do a lot, just add a few. And here as well, let's just add some strokes, going from the middle outwards towards the petals. And it's okay if this middle area is still wet. I don't mind if it blends it a little bit. I always love adding the details. It just brings your flower to life and adds this special touch. Let's see, I'm also outlining these petals so it can give our flower a bit more definition. It was looking a bit like a blob. And these are a bit too dark for me. I'm going to lighten some of them. And we can do the same for the leaves as well. So just get some of that green, and it can be very light. So just add some water to it, and then we're going to add some thin strokes and some thicker strokes if you like. I love how this part turned out, how it's blended into our petal over here. All right, now one last detail. Get my dark purple onto my small brush. I'm going to add a few dots here and there. And here as well. This just adds such a special touch to your flowers. All right, I think I'm gonna leave it like this. It turned out really beautiful. It's such a easy way to create some watercolor flowers, and you can use this as a card to gift it to someone, to gift it to a friend, or you can take a photo of it and then post it to Instagram. And don't forget to tag me when you do. So thank you for following this class. I hope you had fun, and I hope to see you in another class. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel.